A lot of my colleagues keep saying that they don't even consider an f4 zoom lens for their cameras and that f2.8 is much better. Today I'm going to show you that f2.8 is not a necessity. Let's go. What's good guys, my name is Oleg Nikitin and you're watching No Limits on channel. So here you can see three different shots. One is shot with f1.8, the other one is at f2.8 and then at f4. Do you see a dramatic difference in terms of the depth of field and bokeh? I do see the difference between f1.8 and f2.8, but between 2.8 and f4 it's not a huge difference, as you can tell from those images, especially if you consider filming a wide shot like a full-height portrait. So those examples were with 28mm, but what if we take 85mm and compare the depth of field, f1.8, f2.8 and f4? Do you see a dramatic difference between f2.8 and f4? I don't. There is some, but if I didn't write down which is which, you would probably think that it's shot on more or less the same setup, and the same settings of course. So as far as the depth of field goes, the difference between f2.8 and f4 does exist, but it's not dramatic as I said before. And since we're talking about a zoom lens like 24-70, you won't be using this lens for creative shots most of the time. To me, those standard zoom lenses are more for coverage like reportage style shoots, weddings, events, and so on. But for creative shots, I always pick a prime lens. But then guys, you would say it's one step faster with the f2.8 compared to f4. What is one step faster? Basically, it's the difference between 100 ISO and 200 ISO, or let me say 3200 ISO and 1600 ISO. Is it a huge difference? Here I'm showing you the examples of the same shot with different ISOs and with the difference of one stop of light, so basically 1600 and 3200 ISO. Can you really tell the difference in the noise levels? I can if I zoom in a lot and I pixel pip a ton, but for most situations this one stop of light won't save your life. I would much rather pick a fast prime lens like a f1.4 or f1.8, and this would give me a better low light result. So if I am in a low light situation, I always pick a prime lens with fast aperture like f1.8. Also, in many cases, I stop down my lenses and I use like f5.6 or f8 apertures. For instance, if I'm filming a macro shot, I would definitely stop down to at least f8 to have at least some depth of field, not like 1mm thin depth of field, but at least like half a centimeter or maybe 1 centimeter, because macro shots do have really thin depth of field, as you know guys. Also, I usually use f5.6 when I shoot coverage of the events, because I need a lot of subjects and objects to be in focus. So my subject, for instance the speaker, should be in focus, but also I want to see the reactions of the people behind him, so I stop down to f5.6 or even f7.1 sometimes, so it's not a huge issue to me, and I do use stop down apertures and lenses a lot. Not all lenses are super sharp wide open at f2.8, especially third-party lenses as I show you in this example, and they also suffer from a pretty big vignette most of the time at f2.8, so you'll have to stop down anyways to f4 to get rid of the vignette and to get sharper corners. But most lenses at f4 do have pretty good sharpness and vignette performance anyways, so it's another thing to consider. Also guys, there is huge size and weight difference between the f2.8 and f4 lenses. Most of the f4 lenses have much smaller footprint than the f2.8 lenses with the same focal length, or even a different set of focal length, like this 20-70 lens has a wider field of view on the wide end, whereas the 24-70 f2.8 GM Mark II gets only to 24mm, which sometimes can be a limiting factor. And the weight of the f2.8 lenses with similar focal length is always much heavier. This is just the physics, guys. You cannot make an f2.8 lens much smaller than an f4. And usually it's about 20-30% difference in size and weight between f4 and f2.8 lenses. I've been using the f4 standard zoom lenses on my cameras for more than 6 years now. In the past it was the 24-70 Sony Zeiss f4 lens with OSS, and I've used it with my Sony a7S II, with my Sony a7S III, and of course with the Sony ZV-E1 I'm using the 20-70 f4G lens from Sony, and as a reportage style shoot lens, as my standard zoom lens for coverage, this is more than fine to me, and I've never had an f2.8 zoom lens with my Sony cameras. I had one with Canon cameras, but it was really long ago, guys. So these were my full frame cameras, but I also did use my f4 lens, which is Sony 10-18, with my crop sensor camera Sony a6300, and I had no issues with it whatsoever. So I am totally fine with an f4 lens on an APS-C. And also my colleague used the a6500 with the Sony 18-105 f4 OSS lens with built-in motor to zoom in or out, and he also didn't have any issues, and he shot all of his weddings, all of his events, and so on and so forth with this combination to take the coverage of the event. So if it's not a huge issue to me, to my colleague with a full frame and with an APS-C camera for those particular needs, why should it be an issue to you? So let's take a classic example, filming a wedding. So when I use my f4 zoom lens on a wedding, only in two occasions. The first one is the ceremony, when I need to take the reaction of the parents, then a couple, then a wide shot, then a tight shot, and it's more than fine to me to use the f4 lens because I simply, let me say, as a video recorder, I simply record what is happening. It's not the case of filming everything with the fast prime lens to get super creative shots. It's more for the memories. And then I use my f4 zoom lens for the reception party, for the dances, and for the toasts and all that stuff. And besides those two things, I use only my prime lenses like 35mm f1.8 or an 85mm f1.8, and all of the creative shots are made with a prime lens to get better depth of field, to get more creative, to get more filmic looking images, and so on. So for me, f4 worked perfectly fine for the ceremonies and for the wedding receptions. Even if I had pretty dimly lit wedding venues, I was more than fine with my Sony cameras. And guys, I always recommend to have at least one prime lens, a fast prime lens in your kit, like an 35mm f1.8 lens, to have better creative shots, to be able to film in low light situations if it is a pretty dark venue, or if you film something like fireworks and you need a lot more bokeh from the fireworks exploding on the background and so on and so forth. So at least one prime lens. To me, my favorite is 35 f1.8, of course. And keep in mind, guys, that the difference between f4 and f2.8 in terms of the look is not huge, as I showed you before, but between f1.8 and f2.8 there is a pretty substantial difference in light transmission and also in terms of the look. And guys, the pricing. If we have a look at Nikon's, Canon's, Sony's, f2.8 24-70 and f2.8 70-200 lenses, like the GM lenses, they are always well above $2,000, which is not cheap by any means. And if we have a look at the 20-70 f4 lens, it's around $1,000, so it's more than 2 times cheaper than the f2.8 equivalent. So a little bit over the price of the 24-70 GM Mark II, you can buy the 20-70 f4 plus 2 prime lenses with f1.8 aperture, and you'll get from 20mm to 85mm focal length, as well as f1.8 aperture on 35 and 85 lenses, and also a much more versatile kit overall. So before paying this huge amount of cash for the 24-70 f2.8 lens, no matter if it's Nikon, Canon or Sony, please guys, keep that in mind that you can buy an f4 zoom lens and 2 prime lenses of a great quality. To conclude, guys, it seems like the f2.8 has a really good marketing team, and it reminds me of the situation with an iPad Pro, whereas most of the people would be more than happy with an iPad Air for the convenience and for the functions and for the screen size and so on. So if you use your zoom lens like I do for just covering the event for reportage style shoots, having a couple of prime lenses as well, you'll have a much more versatile and much more complete set of lenses instead of using only one 24-70 f2.8 lens. So what are your thoughts on f2.8 versus f4 lenses? Did I convince you to consider an f4 zoom lens, or are you still a fanboy of an f2.8 lens? Please let me know all your thoughts down in the comment section below. If you did enjoy this video, please smash the like and subscribe buttons and hit the notifications bell. And here I have a huge comparison of 6 full-frame 24-70-ish lenses for you to watch next. Thank you so much for watching, and I'm gonna see you in the next one. Take care, bye.